Transform your space from this to this. We partnered with OmniWall on this project, so let's take a look on how we got here. This is the OmniWall system. It's a metal pegboard system, but this is much different from the competition. And I think there's three things that really set them apart. Number one is build quality, just the materials they make it with. It's made right here in the USA, and in fact, they're an actual fab shop, so they know a little thing or two about metal, about steel, and even about powder coating. They're even powder coating this in-house as well. And that leads into the fitment of this as the second criteria that really sets them apart, because every corner is nice and square, every bend is nice and true, so these panels don't walk on you like other panels do when you install them, and if you've installed these before, you know what I'm talking about. And the third thing is how they mount their accessories and how they secure them, and we'll get into that here in just one moment. Now, we had this area here that was just one of those catch-all areas, kind of embarrassing to see the pictures of what it looked like, and we've cleaned that up. We painted the back wall, so let's jump right in and kind of take you along as we build out to this part right here, and then we'll start assembling all the accessories onto the OmniWall system. So this is the current state of our project here for installing the OmniWall system. As you can see, we kind of are half getting started. We basically cleaned the wall, moved out the junk that was there. Pretty embarrassing. This is one of those kind of catch-all corners. Shouldn't have been that way, but it just was the case for the past few months. So anyway, we cleared all that out, and we thought we'd black out this wall before we put everything up there, because it's going to hide anything that you could see through the holes or anything like that. So that's the half-painted wall. We'll get some more paint and get that all painted up nice and flat black on the back. But we've got an all-metal shop, and we kind of want to keep it that way. So we've got metal beams, metal girders, and everything else. So again, we thought we'd stick with all metal rather than putting a wood stud wall in there to mount this to. We're going to use some angle iron, some square and rectangle tubing we have, and get a system up there and then mount the OmniWall. So we're not going to follow this exactly to the T as far as this build. We're going to jump right into the OmniWall, but we'll kind of fast forward as to what we're doing here. And as you can see, I've got just a regular old DeWalt miter saw here that I've got. I think the easiest way to cut metal like this, so angle iron, small tubing, things like that, is a Steel Demon, so a Diablo Steel Demon blade in a regular miter saw, regular battery-powered miter saw. It'll cut, especially this 1/8" stuff, really easy, cut it really effective, and it's just a lot easier to cut right here kind of on site rather than to take it over to the layout and welding table, cut it there, bring it over here, fit it up, because we're going to be doing a lot of kind of fitment and welding kind of in place, if you will, and some clamping. So anyway, let's get started. You can see here's an old cut from probably an abrasive blade, and you see how much kind of shrapnel is left over right there. And you see here on this nice clean cut with the miter saw, just a very clean cut. Now it needs to be deburred, rounded over, and nice and cleaned up a little bit. But as far as the cut, you can't beat that cut, and especially for the quickness and the portability, just throwing that miter saw up anywhere. So we got everything painted up all nice and black back there that should hide anything we see through the OmniWall pegboard once we get it hung up. And we built us a steel frame, if you will, that's going to bolt up to the cross beams that were up there. So a little different setup than typical would be on stud or drywall or even plywood, something like that. But this is, as we mentioned, an all-metal building. We want to keep it that way. So real simple, angle iron top and bottom, a couple of rectangle 1x2 beams coming down. Then we figured out some bracing on the sides, but don't want to get into that. Let's jump into the OmniWall, start mounting this on the frame. Now, typically, you would go ahead and start mounting that to your studs or to your plywood or something like that, and you would start mounting it up on the wall. We're going to do it a little different. We're going to take this frame over to the workbench and start doing it there to explain it in a little more detail, as well as show some close-up, and then we'll get back to how we're going to hang this. All right, you can see we have our steel frame laying here on our worktop, and we're going to just kind of lay out how we're going to do this and explain how the railing system works. Basically, you have a lower cleat and you have an upper cleat. So the upper cleat here has this little step in it, and that's because the lip of the panel is going to go over the top of it. And the lower cleat is, or the bottom cleat is just a pure 90, nice and flat. And on the bottom cleat, the panel is actually going to sit on top of this. So this will be actually below the panel. I'll show you that in just a moment. But on the upper cleat, this will sit inside the panel because, again, it's going to overlap over the top. So in a sense, the panel is resting its weight on the top and resting its weight on the bottom. So the pins aren't holding it in. The cleats are actually holding the panel up, and then the pins are just keeping the panel on to the cleat so that it's bearing the weight. Now, what you're going to get with these panels are you're going to get these push style pins where you have kind of this insert that goes inside of this, and that's going to do most of your installation. And then you'll have these funky looking push clips that are double-sided. Now, what these are for is when you have vertical panels stacked on top of one another. If you're not stacking on top of one another, you don't need these. You don't need these for the sides to connect the two sides. You don't need them for that. You only need them for the vertical to connect a top to a bottom, and that's to keep it kind of nice and meshed together so it doesn't move and keeps everything centered. When you do have a situation where you're stacked on top of one another, then you won't have a bottom cleat in the middle. You'll only have a top cleat that goes in the middle. And your push clips or your double-sided clips here, they are going to go in these larger holes here. And you can see this also on the panel. And something that helps you not get mixed up is on the bottom cleats, you don't see these dual holes. You just see one hole, and you can see how it lines up on the panel here. The smaller holes are for the push pin clips, and the larger holes are your typical kind of Christmas tree double-sided clips. So this will fit through this panel and push into there, and also fit through the top cleat into the larger hole. You see it won't fit through the smaller hole, but it will through the larger hole. So again, you only need these if you're stacking vertically, not side to side. Now you can see here on these panels that they have a lip that not only comes over the top, but also so it waterfalls over the top, and it also comes back this way as well. And that's where it's going to grab onto that cleat and rest the weight on there, so the buttons or the push clips are not bearing the weight. It's actual cleat itself that will be screwed onto this. These would typically be screwed into studs or using drywall anchors or something of the sort, but we're going to be screwing this into this angle iron. So we're going to use some drill tip screws. We may end up pre-drilling these, but we'll start out here just using the drill tip screws. Now, typically on a stud wall, you'd just space, one screw over here, and move on. But we're going to go ahead and install 3 screws on each one. And we're going to use the upper holes here, give it more bracing, more strength. And I'm going to offset it from the edge, just, I don't know, 1/4 inch or so. And we're going to put our screws in the middle, so that gives us in those slots the ability to tune these back and forth if we need to. So now we've got this upper cleat put on. Now we can see how this works. Goes in and it seats on that cleat. And then you line up your holes. Make sure your holes are lined up. Number 2 Phillips seems to fit right in there and center that up really well. And then, rather than leaving the pin in there, pull the pin out of it, push this in, goes in rather easily, and then take your pin. You probably can't push it in, you'll probably have to hammer it in. I'd recommend using a small dead blow hammer or a plastic faced hammer and just kind of hammer that in. Once it seats, now that's locked into place. Now you're really not going to lock those into place until you get your bottom cleats on there as well. But I just wanted to show that to you. And then you can take just a pair of small needle nose if you want to, or some push clip pliers or push clip tools like I've got here, and remove that push clip. Same thing for this one. Pull that out, and if you're nice and careful, especially as they're new, you can reuse these. By the way, these are the same like automotive clips that you can find just about anywhere as well. You can get these from OmniWall. They send a ton of them, but you can also get these various places. So very standard type of push clip. We'll get the rest of these cleats on and move forward. The cool thing is these are the exact same width as the panels, so we should be able to just butt these up against one another and keep moving. And again, if we're screwing in the center of our oblonged holes here, then we should be able to tune it and move it left and right if we do need to open up some space. I'm just going to continue to set this on the bottom of this angle and move on. And we'll get the last one on here. Now you can see I've removed two of the rails, the upper cleats that I already put on, and that's because we have one of the new cabinets that's actually a 32-inch wide cabinet, and it comes with a single top rail, I guess for additional strength to kind of keep everything together. I'm hoping we can utilize, looks like we can utilize all the holes we already have, so it's as easy as removing those two rails. So if you have a system already, an OmniWall system, you want to put one of their cabinets in, you can probably use your existing rails, but if you wanted some additional strength, you can put the single piece rail in with no problem using your existing holes. Now also you'll notice that it's silver and not black, and that's because our cabinets are silver. So you can get these in various colors just like their panels. All right, so what I'm going to do now, you can see we flipped the frame around again, so our top rails are up here. I'm going to go ahead and put a panel on here just to confirm my measurements to mount the bottom rail. I'm going to make sure it's seated all the way. I'm not going to put my push clips in, but just going to confirm that it's seated all the way in the rails. And it should be exactly 48 inches. So now we've got the panel sitting on top of the top rail, and then we see this is dead on 48 inches. That's one of the nice things about OmniWall is they're actually a fab shop, so they understand having correct dimensions and having everything line up correctly is very key. And it looks like we're going to be seated right at the bottom of our angle here. Looks like maybe a hair, a 32nd of an inch, maybe a 16th of an inch. But that gives me an idea of where my bottom rail needs to sit, because let's remember that now the panel is actually going to sit on top of the rail. So it's going to be like this. So it looks like if we mount our rail right there flush with the bottom, that's going to be a great fit. Or maybe just a touch inside the bottom. It's going to be a nice flush look there. And again, if you're mounting this on the wall, be as easy as taking a level and making sure you're level and plumb, and then maybe even taking a laser and shooting it on the wall. Be very easy to do that. But on this case, I'm going to line up these holes, making sure I'm good. Could even make me a mark if I need to. Okay, so we've got our metal frame up, and we've got our rails on, our upper rails, our lower rails, and we're ready to start putting the panels on. Now, again, as I mentioned, we kind of have a different setup here, and what I was trying to do is gain some of this space that we were losing if I just flush mounted this to the front of this beam here. So I wanted to recess it back here and kind of tuck it up under here. Well, to do so, I still have to have a way to get up there and put in my clips. So what I've done is I've got like 2-inch long bolts that are actually holding this frame, and I've got it kind of at the end of the thread, so it's actually down an inch or so that I can get my pins in there and get them in. And once we get the panels in, we'll tighten those bolts. It'll pull that whole frame and panels all the way up to the top here. So if you see a little bit of movement here, it's because the bolts aren't exactly all tight until we get those on there. And here on the sides, we've kind of got it in a clamping mechanism that we fabricated up. So again, not your typical setup here. So if you see some movement, it's because of that. So we'll get these panels hung, we'll get it all tightened up, and then we'll go on to putting on the accessories. And something else I want to mention, you see the silver panels here, or the silver rails. I mentioned about a cabinet, and to actually put the cabinet in, we would not be able to recess that up here. So we're going to move the cabinet elsewhere, but we're short a panel. So we're still going to use these rails, we're still going to use silver panels. We're not going to install the cabinet yet. We'll have a separate video on the cabinet because it's a really cool design and really makes this system even better. But again, we're just going to utilize the panels at this time. We'll come back at a later time and show the cabinet. We're actually going to use it probably on the end of one of our pallet racks. We think that's a great place where a lot of times space is wasted and you don't have any wall space to actually utilize there. But we've got a great idea on how to utilize that and put that cabinet there. So anyway, we're just going to utilize the rails and the backs of the cabinets, the silver panels, to utilize for wall panels. And again, we'll go from there. I found that if you'll pull the pin almost all the way out, you can keep the pin in it and put it in there. And I can pull these in with my fingers too. I don't need a hammer to tap them in. Okay, you'll notice something. I have a gap right here. That's going to pull out in a second. When we bolt this thing up, it's sagging here in the middle. I think when we pull that up, we'll get nice and true and plumb. If not, I can slide those rails over and square those up. But again, I think you'll see that come out in just one moment, because now we have all of them hung. We have the pins in all the top rails, and now we're going to tighten the bolts and pull that snug up to this beam. Okay, I'm going to tighten this middle one. Should pull everything up, and then we'll tighten the outside. So now you can see my gaps tightened up here once we got it screwed all the way up, and I can still tweak it just a little bit, and we're still kind of flopping. I don't have my braces in yet. We'll put those back in just one moment. I just wanted to get this nice and secure all the way up at the top. Now we'll put our braces in, and then we'll finalize getting these panels on the bottom. Okay, and here's our little fabrication here. We have some C-channel that goes and is actually wrapped by some nice aesthetic white aluminum. And we don't want to mess that up. We don't want to run a bolt through there or anything. And I really didn't want to do any penetrations on the structure of the building. So I made these, this kind of cross brace that's going to clamp onto the C-channel here. And on this one here, again, I really didn't want to drill into the main beam. Of course, if I was drilling a 1/4-inch hole, it's probably not going to really affect it. But I made this little clamp here that will clamp onto the beam and then line up to run a bolt in. Now I'm just going to come back and finish putting all our clips in here. Again, I found best if you pull it almost all the way out, it'll slide up in there, and then you can tap it in. A good firm push will push those in as well. Now everything is up and tight. Everything's solid, no movement. Got nice tight seams in between each one of the panels, no gaps, as well as everything is nice and plumb and square on the sides and on the top. I've also got it tucked in that girder. and we're not losing any of that space. The only problem is we can't use our cabinet, but again, we're going to move that somewhere else and utilize that cabinet. It's going to be really cool. Let's set this thing up with some accessories and talk about some of the quality of how well these accessories are built and how well they function. So first off is just kind of a general shelf, and so we'll mount it here on the bottom. And first thing, you'll put the top in first, slide it up, and then let it slide down, and that locks that into place. It's really not locked into place. We'll do that here in a few moments when we get everything positioned like we want it. But I did want to point out that right here on the front of this shelf, we have more hanging areas, so we can put hooks on here and hang stuff off the front of this as well, and obviously put things in here as well. And on each end of this shelf is a hole. So if we want to put a charger, put our cord through there and be able to plug this in. And now we have our charger available. We could also mount this if we needed to, extra batteries, whatever else that we want to store in there. And then we have our large pad holder for our polishers. So you can mount this right over here on the edge. Maybe give this a little more room. Lock that into place. And again, we can fully lock it here in a few moments. Put all our pads in. Now we can just pull the pad out the bottom as we need it. So this is going to be for your larger 5 to 6.5 inch pads. And then we have these smaller, say 3.5 inch and smaller pads. And here's the cool thing about this is they thought about this. So instead of mounting this somewhere else, I can actually utilize this system and put it right there alongside this and use the same mounting holes. So now I'm not taking up any space. There's no gap in between here. Both of those fit in the same holes and lock into place, and they're side by side, and this makes total sense. You may even have, multiple big ones stacked next to each other, so have your all your compounding pads, your fine finish pads, and so forth, single step, and then have all your smaller ones in there as well. And now I'm going to do the same thing with the polisher holders. Obviously, I could mount one up here, but I can also mount that in the same hole, locking those in the same area, and then when we get them where we want them, we can actually tie these together with a push clip. I can lock them down here with a push clip, and I can mount my polishers up there. I'm pretty sure that's where I want my polishers to be, so I'm going to go ahead and lock these in. And these can obviously hold any of your products, spray bottles, polishes, coatings. They're going to hold big bottles, obviously small bottles. You could place the small bottles down here. So several different opportunities to mount this where you want it, depending on what you're using it for. And obviously, with it being a metal pegboard, anything magnetized is going to stick on there just fine as well. Okay. So these are standard hooks, right? So you've got crescent wrenches on there, whatever. You got wrenches on it, and you got to take these off. Now, a lot of times on regular pegboard, everybody hated this, and even a lot of your steel pegboard, is you hit this, it flops all around, and they even fall out. So they've got the answer for this, and that's the push clips. And the great thing about these is you change your mind later and you want to move these around. It's not the end of the world. You get your push clip remover and you pull the clip out and you move it. But now that thing is locked in. It's not going anywhere. You're not going to bump that off. That hook's locked in and ready to go. But again, if we need to, we can pull the clip out and remove that and move it where we need it. We are really excited about how the OmniWall system turned out. Now we'll probably still move some things around, add to it and things like that to get it customized exactly where we want it. And that's the great thing about the OmniWall system. You can buy just the blank canvas where you're just buying the panels and do your own thing. You can buy kits. So they have like a detailing kit. They have a kind of a DIY kit where maybe just 2 panels. You can buy shorter panels. You can buy the panels that go wide rather than tall. You can buy the cabinets. And by the way, we're really excited about the cabinet, and that's going to be a review all in itself because it's really changing the way metal pegboard is done by utilizing the cabinet as part of the integration of the metal pegboard and vice versa. So I think you're really going to like that. So maybe in a couple of weeks, we'll do another review just on the cabinet and probably mounting that cabinet right here to my left, which will be kind of at the end of a pallet wall. Now, we're ecstatic about how we've transformed this area. We've wanted an area that's kind of detailing and paint because that's things we do from time to time, but not all the time. So now we've kind of got a wall where we can keep some polishers out, some pads out, some even our polishes and chemicals and things like that we can quickly get to, as well as even some paint guns that we shoot from time to time, and keeping some sandpaper handy. You're always looking to grab a little bit of sandpaper. Anyway, just a really cool system, and again, going to be really excited when we get the cabinet in use. Now, we're also going to move in a workbench here that'll also have like a cabinet below it to store paints, primers, and that sort of thing. So kind of still working out the details on what we're going to do there, but love the look of this. And I'll tell you, our intention were to have the cabinet have this silver background when you open the cabinet, and then have all black here, but I'm really loving the offset of the black accessories against the silver. Looks really good. I wasn't expecting that. I was thinking I wanted the all black out look, but I think both of them look really cool. Love the build quality of the OmniWall system. I'm telling you, we've seen other metal pegboards. We have them in our shop. Nothing wrong with them, but again, when you start putting these together, you realize how true of a fit they have and how exact all of their corners, edges, bendovers, things like that really are. So kudos to them for that. Love the fact they're made here in the USA as well. So be sure to check them out. We'll have links in the description to some of these things. But again, you can go to their website and build about anything you want to. So be sure to keep track of us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and even TikTok. And if you don't mind, would you hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already? And by all means, if you hated our video, then give us a thumbs down. But would you let us know in the comments why? Have a great day and keep smiling.